So at the pluralist stage, there's also now a turning away from material achievements to inner experience and self-reflection. The inner world becomes so interesting now that getting some money or some sex or a fast car, these things become like child's play. You start to lose interest in them. And also probably because the stage prior to this was the achiever stage, so you've probably achieved a lot of that stuff. You probably did already earn some good money, and you probably did already get your fast car, and you had a house, and you had some sex, and you did some drugs, and you went partying, and you did all this stuff, and you've achieved already a good chunk in your life. And now you ask, well, what's more? It seems like I've already achieved so much. Am I just going to keep achieving more of the same? It doesn't really fulfill me anymore. There needs to be some deeper dimension to life. And so now you're ready to go into the inner dimensions, the dimensions of consciousness, the psychological dimensions. There's an ever deeper discovery of how subjective one's worldview is. This is both liberating and confusing. It's confusing because there's now unlimited ways of seeing the world, and you're struggling to make sense of it all. Remember, the ego's primary job is to make sense of the world. And so now what we're doing is we're sort of taking the way that you were making sense of the world, the conventional ways, we're pulling that rug out from under you, and we're not replacing it with anything. And so you're left in a sort of state of vertigo for years, and maybe for a whole decade, you will be in a state of vertigo, trying to just reorient yourself. And there's a very strong temptation to regress backwards and just to cling to something, let me go back to my religion. Let me just go back to science. Let me just find some way to anchor myself into some sort of cohesive way of making sense of the world. And that is the trap. If you really want to be courageous, you have to let go of the need for any kind of anchors and let yourself be groundless and rudderless for a while, maybe for a few years, maybe for a decade, as your mind is struggling to figure all this out and as you're exploring all these different perspectives. So even though it's confusing and can be emotionally taxing, it's also hugely liberating in the sense that now you have so many more options and possibilities. You're not straitjacketed anymore to one way of doing things, to one way of doing spirituality, to one way of searching for truth. Now you have multiple ways, and that's great. Some of them are going to be terrible, but some of them, a few of them, you'll discover are going to be way better than anything you thought or had before. Now at this stage, at the pluralist stage, it becomes interesting just watching oneself trying to make sense of oneself. You ever done that? You're doing something and then you're just watching yourself doing it and seeing how like a monkey you are, how you're just like a robot, like a zombie, just going through the motions of doing something. And then maybe even the question enters your mind, why am I even doing this thing in the first place? I never even questioned why I should do this thing. Why should I go to church? Why should I read the Bible? Why should I wash my hands? Why should I read a book? Why should I do these? Now, some of them are legitimate to do. Maybe washing your hands is a good idea, especially these days. But then some of those things you realize the only reason I was doing them is because I was like a monkey imitating others who were doing those things. And I thought they were smart. And then I realized that they weren't smart. They were just pretending to be smart because they were just copying other monkeys who were pretending to be smart. But actually, none of them were smart. So who's really smart? How do I even determine what smartness means anymore? The pluralist now abandons purely rational analysis in favor of more holistic, organismic approaches, which take into account feelings, intuitions, and context.